WBNE.
Hello, and welcome to episode 61, all about many partings. Chapter 6, Book 6 of Return of the King, being the 61st part of That's What I'm Talking About. Hello, my name is Mary Clay. If that's too complicated for you, just call me MC. And today I'm joined by Ezra and Lane of an unexpected podcast, Tolkien. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Mary Clay.
Yeah, of course. So actually, I initially found y'all's podcast because we were both listed in some, I think it was a Book Riot article of like the best 9 Lord of the Rings podcasts.
Yeah, that was cool, wasn't it?
Yeah.
One of the 9. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, oh, this is great. So I've been trying to like reach out to as many of the podcasts on that list that I think would be a good fit for this podcast. And I've hit a lot of them so far. So I'm glad that I got y'all in before the end of Return of the King.
Yeah.
But before we start our chapter discussion, tell me a little bit about how you each got into Lord of the Rings.
You always say age before beauty, right?
Yeah, age before beauty, so that's me, right? Okay, all right, I got you. So this is Ez, and for me, it was 6th grade. I started reading The Hobbit, and back then we had something called like accelerated reader points.
Yes.
Yeah,
had those too.
And it was like, okay, do I want to read a whole bunch of books, or do I want to get one big book and just try to get all those points, you know? So I went to 6th grade, I went to the librarian, and she kind of started telling me about different stories and the adventures, and just gave me like a quick synopsis of each of them. And I heard about, Bilbo and this hobbit who, was going to go on this great adventure with these dwarves. And so there we go. I said, sounds great. Give me that. And my mom was so happy that I was reading that she let me read in church, which was crazy.
Whoa,
in the back pew.
Yeah.
Right. Pretty radical. She was super happy because it was a bigger book, and I was a youngster, and I wasn't the best reader at that time. So I was trying to get through it, and I did it. I passed the accelerated reader test. I got all my points, but then I found out that there were more books. And so I think it was 8th grade, 9th grade. I kind of just went through the rest of the Lord of the Rings series, and that was that. Yeah.
Very cool. Did you, I feel like with the AR reading, the prize was always like a pizza party or something or
gift certificate.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Personal pizza.
Yeah, it was a personal pan pizza. It was a certificate. That's hilarious. I forgot about that.
Yes. Oh my God. Loved AR reading.
One pie to rule them all, right?
Yeah.
And Lane, how did you get into Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, so mine, I was totally ignorant to Lord of the Rings, J.R.R. Tolkien, Middle-earth, didn't know anything about it until the trailers for The Fellowship started coming out. I was in 7th grade. I remember it vividly. I was actually going through this in my head the other day because I was like, I wonder if she's going to ask how we got into Lord of the Rings. I had heard of The Hobbit and Bilbo and stuff, and I thought I was too cool for a main character named Bilbo. I have long since learned that was an error of my ways. So I never read The Hobbit. It was Christmas time. Movies had just come out. And we were over at my grandma and papa's house, and my Uncle Joe is a huge shout out to Uncle Joe. He's a big Lord of the Rings fan. He was like, guys get together, we go out and we watch Fellowship of the Ring, Lord of the Rings. I was like, okay, yeah, sure, whatever. So it was me, my dad, my Uncle Scott, my 2 cousins, Preston and Bryn, and my Uncle Joe. Go in, and I had no idea that my life would change when I would walk out of that theater. I was blown away. I was totally transported. I thought, what is this new world? I was as a kid, I was so obsessed with sports. It was sports all the time. So I never really got into the realm of fantasy, even though I was very imaginative and loved just outlandish ideas and wild stories. That part of me had kind of hadn't been tended as much, been sort of neglected in a way. But this woke that up, and I was so just so entranced that I remember the movie being over, and I was like, wait, what happened? Did we leave him here? What happened? And I turned to my uncle because I didn't even know it was a trilogy. And he goes, oh, that's just movie 1. That's book 1. There's 3 books. I was like, what? There's 2 more. So that sent me into, I think the following week, over Christmas break sometime, we went to Barnes & Noble. We got the original film tie-in with all 3 books in one. And I remember I was like, I'm going to read these and I'm going to be ready for the next two movies because I don't want to be shocked at what the ending is. I want to know these stories. So that's really how I fell in love with it. It's I have been saying, and the character I love, I don't know if this is jumping ahead, but it's Aragorn. And since like 7th and 8th grade, I've asked myself in a really tough situation, I think, what would Aragorn do? WWAD. So it has changed my life big time.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's your viewing of Fellowship is very similar to my only viewing of Fellowship, and it's the reason why I really didn't like Lord of the Rings or the movie or anything, because I'm watching the movie and then I realize, oh, there's 5 minutes left and they're like nowhere near Mount Doom. What's happening? I was so frustrated, and I was texting my friend who's a huge lifelong Lord of the Rings fan the whole time I was watching it, and I was like, I don't get it. They don't. What do you? He's like, it's a quest. Like the whole thing is an epic journey, and it's the three. I was like, I thought they destroy the ring first movie, and then he was like, well, what do you think Two Towers and Return of the King are about? And I was like, I don't know, complications arise. Like battles, elves, who knows?
Pretty much too.
Well, this chapter, man, is a doozy. This is book 6, chapter 6, Many Partings, and it's so sad and depressing, and I like legitimately teared up at a lot of moments, and I haven't like cried at a book since probably the first time I read Deathly Hallows. And that being said, though, Tolkien and his pacing, man, because this chapter feels so rushed.
Yeah. I mean, it is. So it's wild, right? Because we were just talking as we kind of wrapped up our read of Return of the King. Like I was emotional, crying like the last several episodes. I'm like, this thing is like what's going on? So this is one of those chapters, though, Many Partings, where you got to shed a tear. If you're not, I don't know what you've been reading.
Yeah, right. And it is interesting. It is pacing, right? Because you slowly meet all these characters and you fall in love with them, and you have all this time to develop these relationships almost with these characters. You know, first you have the hobbits that come together, then you have you run into Tom Bombadil, and you get the fellowship that's formed. And along the way, you pick up these characters, and then you're right, like essentially in one chapter, we say goodbye to all of them, and it is. And I think some, like when I was reading this, I was probably ready to be done reading. So for me, it's funny to hear you say that, because for me, I was like, man, this chapter took forever, and I was like, but in my mind, I had to step back and think, well, we've spent forever with these characters. We've spent a long time getting to know them. And to me, I love how Tolkien does this. He transcends fantasy, because in most fairy tales, epics, you don't have this much time saying goodbye to characters. I love how he almost kind of crosses over into realism, whatever. And it's like, well, no, you would have this downtime. You would have this falling action where characters part, and it's kind of rough, and it's not super happy. Like that, some of them might never see each other again. And I love that he took time to do that.
Yeah, I want to mention, so like it's like they went on this great quest, and they went to war, right? And I think like it is abrupt that it's like everyone's got to go to it takes time for them to get back home, and they've got to go their separate ways. And so as that's happening, it's just like, I don't know if you could, because I know what you're saying. It does seem really like I want to sit down for a second with Treebeard and others and talk to them and kind of go over stuff, but we're just like, we just need to get through this really quickly because we're on a journey home, and this is So I didn't really think about that, but realistically, that is like if you were coming back from war, you're like, hey, we've been fighting this whole time, we've been doing whatever, and then this person's just like, I gotta go, see ya, catch up later.
Yeah, and this whole ending it's just so weirdly paced for me. The couple chapters that happen after I think it's chapter 3, Mount Doom, where they destroy the ring, and it's like, okay, great, that's the climax of the book, it's done. And then there's 100 pages left of it, and like on one hand, I'm like, come on, Tolkien, let's just wrap this up. Let's do this. A lot of authors do this nowadays a lot faster and neater than you do. And then there's this chapter.
I can't wait for you to finish the book. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah, and then there's this chapter where he all of a sudden like kicks it into high speed, and we say goodbye to like 20 characters at once in the span of like, 5 pages or whatever. So I'm conflicted because I'm like, do I want him to go faster or do I want him to slow down? I don't know. So, but we'll dive right into this chapter discussion at the beginning. So where we last left everyone, Aragorn and Arwen are married, kind of inexplicably, at least for the books, where she just shows up and bam, they're married. And Tolkien had to have been like, well, this should have been obvious to everyone, but to the readers, it's like, this is very random, but okay. And so they're all celebrating and coming down kind of off of this happiness high, and Frodo finally is like, this is great and all, but I really would like to leave.
Yeah.
Love you, man, but can we leave? I'm really missing Bilbo. I wonder why he didn't come with everyone who came from Rivendell. And that's when I was like, oh yeah, Bilbo. What are you doing, man?
Yep.
Where is he? And Arwen says something completely distressing to me. She says, talking about Bilbo, but your kinsman possessed this thing longer than you. He is ancient in years now, according to his kind, and he awaits you, for he will not again make any long journey save one. And I was immediately panicked, like, because I had never once considered the idea that Bilbo might die. Like, all of these characters, I never thought that Bilbo could die.
That's why elves unsettle me so much. Is they'll say stuff like that, and you're like, well, what do you mean? What do you see? And they speak in riddles. They tell you yes and no, right? They're so far-seeing and ethereal to a sense that it's almost like they're communicating on another plane. Like and I think a lot of times Tolkien does that. Like you said, with the whole thing of, oh yeah, okay, well there's Arwen and they're getting married, I guess, and in the story arc, that the whole reason they weren't together was because the ring hadn't been destroyed yet, and that was the one last thing that had to happen. But it's just, yeah, so it's interesting how they will say stuff that unsettles every time. I would not hang out with elves. Would you?
Oh no, I think you're like,
except for Glorfindel. You love Glorfindel.
Well, I love Glorfindel. That's for sure. But
they freak me out.
Yeah, it's like, what is she talking about? And then I just feel like they are like, there's a sweetness, but there's also this mystery too, where I'm like, are
scary,
you
dangerous? They're dangerous.
Yeah, it just I think she's trying to be like comforting a little bit, but at the same time that didn't help. That didn't necessarily help Frodo. Like, he's wondering.
Oh yeah, it made it 20 times worse, because she's saying here that, well, Bilbo was in possession of the ring for way longer than you. He drew an attachment to this ring, even though he hasn't been with it in a long time. When you destroyed it, you have also, in some sense, kind of like destroyed a part of him.
Yeah,
and now
that's a great point.
He's really old to begin with, and like, even for, because when we later see him, he says that, like, oh, if I live one more year, I'll be older than the oldest hobbit or whatever. I think it's just calls him the old Took. Yeah.
Yep.
He's like, I'll be the oldest one to ever live. Isn't that exciting? But now that the ring has been destroyed, he is more in danger of dying. And the phrase, let's see, he will not again make any long journey save one. And I was like, oh my God, he's never going to get back to the Shire, and the long journey save one. I'm assuming she means death, but that's just like a much more beautiful way, like kind of like you guys were saying, where she says it's kind of like a beautiful way to say that, but it's also scary when you get down to it and you're like, oh, she's talking about him dying. That's terrifying and sad. But she's like, oh yeah, la di da di da.
Right. And then you read that next line where he says, and then I beg leave to depart soon. I mean, she's definitely like, well, once you hear that, I've got to go.
Yeah.
This is Uncle Bilbo, so.
And then poor Frodo, Aragorn's response, "In 7 days we will go."
Yeah, we talked about this when we read through it, and I'm like, Aragorn does not want this party to end. He's been waiting for this party for a long time, and he talks earlier. I think it's right before he takes the past the dead, and Eowyn is kind of entreating him to stay, and he throws out this line that I love because I think it's a lot on how Peter Jackson sort of formed him as a reluctant hero. He says, if you think, essentially paraphrasing, if you think I wouldn't rather be in Rivendell right now, and far from here, like this is the last thing I want to do. I know I have to, it's my destiny or, whatever, but this is the last thing I want. So he is finally, where he wants to be, surrounded by people he loves. The fight is over. There's no more this pressure to ascend and to do it the right way and to resist the ring and, not fall as his fathers have before him. And so he's just like relishing every moment. But the rest of them are even the other hobbits are like, let's get going. It's time to go home. We're not home. Aragorn is home finally. He's been ranging for a long time, hasn't had a place to call his own other than Rivendell, and they're ready to go and see what their corners of Middle Earth are like.
Yeah,
so,
that's actually a good point. Is like you're throwing a bash and everyone's like, but I gotta drive back,
right.
man.
It's my birthday, man. It's my birthday. Come on, stay a little later.
But stay, yeah. So.
Yeah, Aragorn and Arwen are obviously very happy where they are. Obviously, everyone else is like, we're ready to go home. And Arwen says, she says that she's not going to go with them, she's not going to go with Elrond back to Rivendell, obviously, because she has married Aragorn and has fulfilled. She says, "For mine is the choice of Luthien, and as she so." Oh my gosh. "And as she so have I chosen, both the sweet and the bitter." And that just brings full circle this Luthien Baron story that Aragorn first told in Fellowship of the Ring when he was first with the hobbits, which I initially brushed off as being like, oh my God, Tolkien, stop with the useless stories. Because at the time, I just thought it was like, oh, this is just another random story or like piece of history tangent that he's going off on.
Is this another Tom Bombadil? Jeez.
Yeah.
Come on.
And I was like, I'm sure this won't matter or have any importance, but like, come to find out that was actually one of the only main signs about Aragorn and Arwen in the books. So I just like laughing at myself for that. But and she gives Arwen gives Frodo a like elf necklace, and she says, "When the memory of the fear and the darkness troubles you, this will bring you aid." I was like, man, these hobbits are so lucky with all these elf light magic gifts, because Galadriel saved their butts with her gift to them, and then here he is getting another elf magic gift, and they're just so lucky.
Yeah, they're definitely the gift givers.
Yeah. But can I say though, that I just want to throw this out here. I don't know if we'd be in this position if Boromir or someone else would have taken. We're in a position where we can receive gifts because of the mighty ring bearers.
Yeah.
Our hobbits.
Yeah. Right? I also love that.
I'm just kind of teasing, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I do. Yeah. I also love too that this is a gift that's given because if we think about it, without Frodo's sacrifice, without Frodo's destruction of the ring, bearing it the whole way, Arwen and Aragorn would not be able to be together. They wouldn't even, this wouldn't have happened. And so it's almost like, in a sense, you gave your life for me, I give you my eternal life. And I love too how did you like that?
I like that. Yes.
Cuff off the cuff. But I also, so I won't, because you haven't seen the movies, right? And you don't remember Fellowship very much?
Correct.
Okay. So I will just say that Peter Jackson changes aspects of this jewel. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay,
yeah,
because I don't want to ruin it.
No. I've heard that generally in the movies, the whole Arwen Aragorn thing is done much better than in the book.
Yeah, for like understanding their love story, it's so much better, way better. But this jewel plays a different role in the movie, and it's cool, and I like it. And actually, it's one of the most popular pieces of like the film's jewelry. But I think this is so much more meaningful. I love the way he wrote it as opposed to the way the film executes it. So this moment here, this is one that I forget about. You know, you read the books a few times and there's stuff that sticks out, and there's stuff that, just because it's so long, like you said, you just get inundated in all these side stories and histories that he alludes to that you forget stuff. Or I do anyway. And this is one that when we were reading through again, I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even remember this. And it hits in a different way when you've seen the movies a bunch of times, and then you read the book again for the first time in years, and you think, you know what? That's pretty fresh. And that's why you can read these books again and again, and new things pop out to you, and you find the way that he did it originally is a little more satisfying than what they do in the movies. But I love this symbol that gift she gives him.
Speaking of like side stories and things that you forget, we move to the feast and celebration that everyone is having before they all depart. And Eomer and Gimli have this moment that I 100% had forgotten about. And this just once again goes back to Tolkien being like, you might have forgotten, but I didn't forget. And he has to, of course, wrap up every, like even... Like when this initially happened, the start of Two Towers, when Eomer and Gimli and them first meet, I was like, oh, it's just a joke. Okay, whatever. No, Tolkien takes it very seriously and comes back, and it's like, we have to talk about it, because I'm sure my readers are going to be driving themselves insane trying to figure out what became of this, which obviously isn't true. But so they're at the feast, and Eomer sits down next to Gimli and is like, oh, do you have your axe ready? Because we have a bet or whatever to settle. Because now I have seen Galadriel. And back in Two Towers when they first met, Eomer kind of insulted Galadriel, and Gimli, being her like weird unofficial boyfriend who's obsessed with her a lot, was like, how dare you insult my woman? And was like, I will kill you if you ever say that again. He's like, okay, well, if I see her, I will rectify that statement. And Gimli says, okay, well, now that you've seen her, what do you have to say? I love this exchange. Alas, said Eomer, I will not say that she is the fairest lady that lives. Then I must go for my axe, said Gimli. Gimli's like, all right, well, time to kill a bit. But Eomer says, however, it's only because I have also seen Arwen, and I think she is more beautiful. And Gimli's like, okay, well, that's fair. So there we go. This random little story wrapped up.
Right.
Ending.
Right.
Great.
The neat part is, like, they settle on the fact that one has chosen the evening and the other has given
morning.
to the morning. Yeah, which I was like, all right, well, just a greater appreciation
Got
for
the whole day of beauty covered there. Yep.
Right, yeah. Yep. Yes, so then everyone departs for Rohan, and they are leaving to do the official ceremony and burial for Theoden, who at this time hadn't been buried yet. And basically everyone comes with them. There's the entire fellowship, minus Boromir, obviously. Let's see, Eowyn and Faramir, all of the elves, Elrond, Galadriel, Kellett, they're all there. And they all go and have this very beautiful ceremony and farewell for Theoden, and it was just it was a nice moment for him, since we didn't really get that because he died in the middle of a huge battle, and even after that battle was over, there was still so much more to do and recover from that there wasn't really time to take that in. And so I think that's what they're also all doing here, is taking that time to finally officially recognize and say goodbye to him. And what's really great is Tolkien gives an entire paragraph where he lists the entire lineage of Theoden.
Yeah, Theoden's one of my, I like him a lot. And gosh, look at what he does, right? I mean, he is the king that he falls on the battlefield, and another king literally rises and rides to war. And and then you also have the whole idea that you have a return of the king who is also then coming in. It's just kind of crazy. I just love Theoden. So it's neat that they are taking time, even though there's a little bit of a rushed pacing to this, but they are kind of, I guess it's like, there are still days that pass here, but we just, as the reader, are kind of forced through those days pretty quickly. Which
is amazing for Tolkien, because you would expect him to fill those days, to address every single day, and he doesn't.
But it's good. I think he deserves. I mean, he
without
truly
him
does deserve kind of this whole for everyone to go and attend his burial. Like it's important. So
yeah, and I think at one point he even makes a comment about like no king had ever had such a great company be there to recognize him.
It's the All-Stars. Yeah.
And with this also is this chapter is very bittersweet in general. There's this very bittersweet moment of, okay, we're mourning Theoden, but we're also celebrating / recognizing Éomer as the new king. Mm-hmm. And I think he even says that like Theoden wouldn't want this to be a sad moment. He would want it to be a celebration of all of us. And he also takes a moment to recognize Éowyn and Faramir getting married. Again, for me, this was a not so. I have conflicted feelings, as I said in the episode on the previous chapter. I have a lot of conflicted feelings about Éowyn and Faramir. I love them both, and I would literally only like Faramir is the only person I think who would deserve Éowyn, so that's fine with me. However, I'm not a fan that Tolkien was like, Éowyn can't be with Aragorn. I'll put her with like the nearest available man, and gives her to Éomer, and she just immediately gives up like all of her. At that point, her character was all about like fighting and having a lot of ambition and fire and passion behind her, and then she like kisses Éomer and is like, never mind, I don't care about any of that anymore. I'm gonna be your, well, I guess not queen, because they're not king and queen, but anyway.
Yeah, lady. Yeah.
I think it's great actually hearing, because we talked about this when we read Houses of Healing, and we were like, this is just like two guys' perspective of the story. We would love to hear like a girl's point of view, a woman's point of view on this, this relationship. Like, because they're such interesting characters. Like Éowyn could have her own story. Like she could be the lead in her own story, and she's a strong female character. When he wrote this, that wasn't happening. I mean, it's just now starting to happen in our time. So I think he did something incredible there. But yeah, because we talked about that sort of transfer from her being like, let's go, to okay, I'm fine. That stuff doesn't matter anymore. And we kind of wanted like a female perspective on that.
Yeah.
So it's cool to hear you. Yeah.
You will get that. It has the episode on the previous chapter hasn't come out. It'll come out this Thursday as we're recording this, or Tuesday. But yeah, I basically opened it with like, listeners, if you don't like feminist rants, this is not the episode for you. But yeah, I had like, and my guest as well, we had a lot of thoughts going into this relationship in the chapter about like, it's great because like on one hand we want these characters to be happy, and I fully like, no joke, love Faramir. He's great, and Éowyn's great, obviously. But I like wasn't a fan that he just had to like immediately pair her off with someone who kind of seemed to strip her of a lot of her main character traits at that point. But anyway, yeah. So all that being said about their relationship, so Éomer now announces this and is like, yay, this is happy. And Aragorn comes over, and tells Éomer that he is given like the fairest woman, that it was like very nice of him and generous of him to give the fairest woman of Rohan to Gondor. And it says, then Éowyn looked in the eyes of Aragorn, and she said, wish me joy, my liege, lord, and healer. And he answered, I have wished thee joy ever since I first saw thee. It heals my heart to see thee now in bliss. And it's nice to have this bit of closure, because obviously Éowyn has been in love with Aragorn. TBH, I still think she's in love with Aragorn, because aren't we all? We all love him, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I know you're a Gandalf guy, but yes, I am in love with Aragorn. Yeah.
So, but it's nice to have this bit of closure where their they're both like moving on to this next phase in their lives and moving on from each other.
Yeah. There's one moment before we move on, if you don't mind. The moment with Eowyn, his minstrel. I loved that he made this song, and after that, no other song did he make. Like I love that Tolkien put that in there, that like his job was to make music for the king, and the king is now gone, or his king is now gone. And so I love that sense of purpose that he puts into a lot of his characters. I think also maybe that may have been just like a commentary on a different time where this was my job, this is what I was supposed to do, and once that's over, I'm done essentially. And I just love that he no longer made music. That was the last song of Eowyn. We talked about that when we read this chapter, and just little stuff like that sometimes sticks out.
Yeah,
right?
So it's like who is that guy, right? But he's this guy.
Yeah, he's got his own story. He's got his own story,
and like you would think about that,
right?
Dude, he was wrecked, just drinking beer and crying, and like everyone else, like, dude, it's okay, man. There's a proposal, and Eomer just got the crown, He's like, but my king's gone.
Right.
That is kind of crazy to think about. What you're talking about with the minstrel, and how like as much as I love making fun of Tolkien and how he has like 50 characters that he names and brings into the story, there's still like even more people in this land who had their own lives and their own reactions and thoughts to all of these events, and it's crazy to like go down that rabbit hole when you start thinking about it too hard.
And it's crazy to think how the guy literally made these stories so he could have a place for his language to live. Like that was it. He was like, I made these languages. I want them to be real. I'm going to make some stories. And so like when you think about that, it's like, of course he's obsessed with names. Of course he's going to list everything that has to do with, but for like a normal guy like me, I'm like, geez, dude, I don't know how did his brain function? Did he ever stop? Did he ever, it is amazing.
I think
like
the answer is no. He did never stop. He never stopped.
Yeah.
So after the feast and everything, Eomer and Eowyn, and does Faramir come with them? I think it's just Eowyn and Eomer come to Merry and say goodbye to him because he served as a soldier or a page or something. He served for Theoden and their army, and they come to say goodbye and thank him. And Eomer says, my sister begs you to receive this small thing as a memorial of Durnhelm and of the horns of the mark at the coming of the morning. And this made me stop because I was like, wait a minute, does Eomer not know? I was like, is this a joke about Eowyn disguising herself as Durnhelm, or does Eomer just not know that Eowyn was Durnhelm? And he's like, oh, we know you were really close to this one soldier named Durnhelm. Here's a memorial in his honor. And then Eowyn's just standing there like biting back a comment about like, it was me, you idiot.
Right.
And like did like it, and that like led me down a path of like, wait, did anyone ever recognize what Eowyn did, or was this just something that like in the chaos of the battle everyone like missed and was like, oh no, we didn't realize that she did that?
Yeah, there could have been. I guess, yeah, that's a good point. I in my mind, in my headcanon or whatever, kind of think that it was discussed, it was known, but you wish maybe there was a little bit more kind of like a direct sort of, this is what you did.
Acknowledgement of what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because we just hear about like the effects that gets discussed, almost like the effects of taking on, the Black Captain and all that, everything that took place there. But yeah, is it, I mean, I don't know.
I do love that Eowyn seems like the kind of person who would not really even care though. She'd be like, whatever, you guys don't even know I did it. Well, I did it. I love her confidence that just oozes, man. She doesn't care.
Yeah.
Like you talked about, it took a while for Faramir to win her over. She was like, I don't need anybody. I'm dead. And so this whole concept that's a great. I didn't even think about that. That's a line that when we read most recently I missed. And so I'm thinking about that. That's crazy. She just, but I love that built in her character is this kind of whatever, I know who I am. Doesn't matter if you do or not. That could also be. But yeah, you'd imagine like Mary and Eowyn just avoiding eye contact and like giggling and stuff.
So that's kind of what I was kind of picturing here, is maybe this is something where I kind of thought that eventually everyone realized, oh, Eowyn was this man Durnhelm. Okay, we're all in on it together. But I also like this alternative viewing of this where no one connected the dots because they're all just oblivious. And this is just something that like Eowyn will laugh about to herself whenever she like overhears someone being like, "Oh, today is the anniversary of Durnhelm's death. It's so sad, isn't it?" And then she's just kind of like laughing under her breath, like, "Oh my gosh, you guys are so stupid. What you don't know." And they give him this horn of Rohan, I think. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And she says, "He that blows it at need shall set fear in the hearts of his enemies and joy in the hearts of his friends, and they shall hear him and come to him." And I was like, oh, okay, I see how this chapter is going to go. Each of the 4 hobbits is going to get some kind of special gift from one person or another. That's kind of sort of how it went. But so they leave. And I love how Tolkien included this. He says, "So they parted for that time." And the addition of those 3 words, "for that time," is so, it's like a lot more heartfelt to read, that like they're saying goodbye, but at one point in the future, they will probably be meeting again, and it's not goodbye forever. And it did something to at least lessen the blow, because this was when I was like, oh my, no, Éomer,
right?
Eowyn, Faramir, Imrahil, we're all leaving these people. No, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, I actually had that underlined in my book too. So for that time, I was sort of like, so what? I mean, is there more, or is it like I kind of was wondering, like, is there are they going to see them again, or is it really we're saying like in this time we are parted? I mean, I was like, seemed like there was more, but yeah,
I feel like it could also be that maybe he's saying that like they will meet again one way or another, whether it's like in some version of the afterlife, or people are never even after they've died, people are never truly gone from you. Mm-hmm. Maybe that kind of a way. But
the ones that love us never really leave us, and you can always find them in here.
But I just like this kind of like sentimentality that he's placed over this entire chapter and everyone's farewells and whatnot. Right. So then they move on and they go from Edoras and they go towards Helm's Deep. And once again, another little side story that I totally forgot about.
Right, yeah.
But Tolkien's not going to forget. Then Legolas repaid his promise to Gimli and went with him to the Glittering Caves. And when they returned, he was silent and would say only that Gimli alone could find fit words to speak of them. And never before has a dwarf claimed a victory over an elf in contest of words, said he. Now, therefore, let us go to Fangorn and set the score right. I love these two. Yeah. I love these two. I love that line that, like, never before has a dwarf claimed victory over an elf in a contest of words.
Yeah.
That's just so funny, these guys.
I can almost picture him, like, walking back and Gimli just sort of, just giving him a little bit of, what'd you think about that, right? He's just tongue-tied, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's beautiful, because their friendship is so unexpected that when we see... And it started kind of slow just because of the anti-dwarf, anti-elf thing, us hating each other by our race, that when you have moments like this, they're even sweeter. And we think, man, like if it wasn't for this quest, they wouldn't even know each other. And here they are. And when you think about their fates eventually, they're the best of friends. And it's really cool to see. Yeah. And for them to remember, like, hey, when we get back here, I'm taking you to the caves. All right, when we get back to Fangorn, I'm taking you to the woods. Okay, all right, yeah.
I think it's also just like a huge part of their characters that they are going to like, it's not necessarily a grudge that they're holding, but they're like, I'm not going to let you forget. You said that you would would go with me to the Glittering Caves, and I'm going to hold you to that.
We do the same thing all the time, don't we?
Yeah, we do. Do we?
Still waiting on that drive.
Yeah, sure.
And then they move towards Isengard, where I just love how like we're just backtracking through the entire course of, you know, Fellowship of the Ring and Two Towers, and we're like visiting all of these old memories. And
It's like a
these
farewell
places.
tour almost.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but do a lot. I think we talked about this when we got to this chapter. It's like, I think it's interesting that he does that. We actually go directly back this path. Like when I think of other great stories and great adventures, you get to the end and there's some other ceremony in a different place, and we don't really go all the way back through each of those major, you know, points. Does that make sense? I mean, it's sort of amazing that he did that. I'm like, why? I mean, there are people that we left there along the way, and we can easily go back to them. But it's interesting that we do that.
And that's why I think he transcends there. He becomes like almost a nonfiction author in that respect, because you would go, I mean, you know, if we had this huge journey and we got to go back anyway, well, we're that close to Treebeard, we might as well go through Fangorn to see what's going on and see what's happened to Saruman, and you know, and it's so natural. But the fact that he takes time to do it is at all. I mean, I think most authors would have cut this because they would think, it's kind of, we've been there. I mean, nothing massive happens, and it's probably not going to be anyone's favorite chapter. But the fact that he does do it, and like you said, Mary Clay, the sentiment that's involved in this chapter, you get to relive some of your favorite moments from. It's like a highlight reel from the from the story.
Exactly.
Yeah.
To me, he wrote this chapter because Tolkien is just not an author who is going to leave any kind of loose thread. And like, no matter how small, he is not going to leave the loose thread of like, I wonder what happened with that argument that Gimli and Éomer got into about Galadriel. Yeah. And like, oh, but did Legolas and Gimli go see the glittering caves? That's a loose, because in his mind, he thinks that the reader is going to like pull apart his work on this one thread. And so he has to weave them all in.
And the thing that drives me nuts about Tolkien, if I can be honest, can I be honest?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Is that he will do that, right? But then you'll hear these people who wrote letters and asking him these deep questions and like, who is Tom Bombadil? And he'll go, dude, you're thinking way too hard about it. It's just a story. And I'm like, you jerk, you know, we want more answers. And it's like, anytime someone came at him, he would, you're right, he would go on forever, the importance of this and the importance of this, and I'm gonna finish this. And then someone would ask a question, and I wonder maybe if it was like because he's thinking, oh crap, I didn't finish that, or I didn't explain that very well. Well, it doesn't really matter. You know, it's just a story. Like, come on. Let's not take it too seriously. But I love and hate that about him, because he knew what he was doing, man. He knew what he was doing, and it drives me nuts sometimes.
Yeah. Same though, because I make a lot of fun of Tolkien, but at the same time, I'm like, but if he didn't do this great, like, yeah, it's like so wonderfully, skillfully crafted. As much as I love to like give him slack for it.
Yep. Agreed.
So they get to Isengard, and at first I was like, oh yeah, Isengard. I kind of forgot about that. Who should walk up but Treebeard? And I lost it because I've been screaming this entire time in Return of the King, where are the Ents? Where are the Ents?
Oh my gosh.
They need to be helping us. I still stand by this statement. Treebeard tells us what they've been up to, that they have been kind of helping this cause in the background. But I still stand by this statement that I think it would have been a better, because I'm obviously a much better writer than Tolkien. I think it would have been a better story writing device if instead of the eagles coming to save the day, it was the Ents, that like all of a sudden we haven't seen the Ents in forever, and we think that they're just done and they're not going to show up again and they're not going to come to help, and then bam, who's there to save the day? The Ents.
That would have been pretty epic. Yeah.
This theory falls apart when someone pointed out and was like, but the Ents can't go save Frodo and Sam in Mordor because they would catch on fire. Yeah. And I was like, well, okay, fine.
How cool is that symbolism, though? Like a land that was stripped of nature and these walking trees coming back and saving it. That's not lost on me. That would be pretty cool. Yeah.
See?
But you're right. You get close, and they're just a match. They're a torch. They're just gone.
Yeah, exactly. So like,
Treebeard's
it
on
kind of falls
fire.
apart
There's
there.
no. Yeah,
But-
yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So I lost my mind because I was like, oh, thank God we're gonna see them again. I was really worried that we just were done with the Ents and we would never see them. Treebeard comes over and says, "But you have not been idle either, away in the south and the east, I hear. And all that I hear is good, very good." Then Treebeard praised all their deeds, of which he seemed to have full knowledge. And at last he stopped and looked long at Gandalf. And I just love this, like, I like forgot how much I enjoyed reading Treebeard and having his like presence, because it's the Ents, like their energy slows everything down, and it's like just a much more like calming presence for them to be there, and I miss them. And I just love that he says, "You have not been idle either, away in the south and the east." And it's like, well, I mean, yeah, to say the least.
Yeah, right,
yeah.
right. Yeah. Which is ironic coming from him because, yeah, he talks so much. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he says that the orcs had been passing through the land and they stopped them. And he starts by saying the name of what they call the orcs. And I just love it so much. He says, "Those evil-eyed, black-handed, bow-legged, flint-hearted, clawing-eared, foul-bellied, bloodthirsty," and then a long word in Entish. And then he stops and says, "Well, since you are hasty folk, and their full name is as long as years of torment, those vermin of orcs."
Yeah.
And so the Ents, that's what the Ents had been doing this whole time, is they were stopping the orcs from getting to, or stopping more orcs, I guess, from getting to Minas Tirith and over to Mordor.
Almost like a kind of like a rear side guard, still, dealing with that second tower.
Dividing those forces so that they can't. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a barrier you have to go around.
Yep.
I mean,
Yeah, I mean, because and even thinking if Saruman would have gotten loose somehow and gone to Mordor, like would he have gotten some,
That could have been bad.
Pump up from that and like some strength that would have affected the war? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm.
yeah.
It would have been, I don't know, because the other thing is that Saruman was so, because we find out, so Treebeard had been guarding Saruman, and we find out that essentially Treebeard had basically just been boring him to death. Because he had just talked to Saruman, and Saruman, the only thing he could do was sit there and listen. And the Ents talk very slowly and have these long words for everything. And he says that Saruman just kind of like started withering away, essentially. And for a moment, like Gandalf, I thought Saruman had died, and I was like, oh my God, the Ents bored Saruman to death. That's hardcore.
I actually wrote "spoke to death," like they spoke him to death.
Yeah.
Like it's insane. But then I was like, yeah.
I love these Ents, man. They're so great. I love them. So Gandalf is like, oh my God, is he dead? Did you kill him? And Treebeard says, no. Eventually, after we knew the ring had been destroyed, we let him go because I figured he was no danger anymore. And Gandalf was like, I don't know about that, bud, but okay. And immediately I was like, I don't buy this whole, like, we just let Saruman go and that's the end of his story thing. I was like, if I know Tolkien, in one way or another, there's more to Saruman than just this. And then, like, you basically flip the page and, like, it's like, oh, there he is again. Okay. But, like, I immediately was like, I don't buy this for a second that we let him go and that's just the end of that.
Yeah. It is interesting, right, that Treebeard is, like, the reason why he lets him go. It's like he keeps him there long enough, but he's explaining to Gandalf, like, this, Gandalf. I don't like keeping, living creatures caged up. And I was like, well, there you go, Tolkien. There it is.
And it's amazing, too, how we see this theme of pity come back again and again and again. Pity that Gollum even existed in this time to be able to, the pity of seeing here. It just happens again and again. I think the word pity was used in a different way, even with Faramir and Eowyn. It's a recurring, whatever. And to see it here again and to think anytime there's pity involved, something pretty big happens. So that you were like, he's not gone. There's no way. That's very perceptive. And definitely.
I think I think that also goes along with Tolkien's theme of mercy coming into play a lot.
Yeah, I think you could use them interchangeably almost. Yeah.
Yeah, and I posted a meme on the Instagram when I'm trying to think. I can't even remember. Oh, it was joking about like, man, Frodo and Sam destroying the ring. That was like pure luck or something, a joke about that. And someone commented, and even though the meme was a joke and everything, someone commented and was like, oh, it wasn't luck at all that they destroyed the ring because Tolkien rewards mercy. And I was like, oh, that's like I hadn't like really thought about it like that he rewards mercy. And it goes back to because Sam had shown Gollum mercy just moments before by not killing him. Yep. And that like went all the way back to when Gandalf was telling Frodo the tale of Gollum in the beginning of Fellowship, and how because Frodo makes a comment about like, oh, that's terrible that he didn't kill him. I would have killed him. And Gandalf was like, no, showing mercy to a creature or whoever who doesn't deserve it is the greatest thing you could do. And
the wisdom of Gandalf.
Yeah. And that's what Treebeard has done here for Saruman. But Gandalf also points out, he's like, however, it could have also been that he used his voice and his power still against you to kind of convince you to let him go anyway. And Treebeard's just kind of like, oh, well, what can you do? He's gone now anyway.
That's funny. Yeah, he's gone. Sorry, Gandalf.
Yeah.
I think that also like maybe shows a characterization of Treebeard, how he's seen so much. He's seen it all. That's something that, Gandalf will go, oh, hold on a second. He's like, I mean, it'll be fine. We'll all be fine. In the same way that Tom Bombadil was kind of like, ring? What ring? Come on.
Exactly.
It's like there are these higher beings that have been around forever, and it's like, I've seen you guys come and go. It's happened before. It'll happen again, and you'll be all right. It's just interesting the different perspectives you have, because you think of Gandalf that way, right? We think of Gandalf as like, dude, he probably doesn't sweat anything. And then to see him almost in the role of like like a hobbit or something compared to Treebeard of just this having been around for so long and perspective and stuff. Yeah.
So Treebeard asked them if they would all like to stay and hang out for a little bit. And they're all like, oh, I wish we could. It said, and this is when like I started just getting, I got like really, really sad. I'm going to read this paragraph basically because it made me sad. Or actually, no, this is more about Legolas and Gimli. It says, but all save Legolas said that they must now take their leave and depart, either south or west. Come, Gimli, said Legolas. Now by Fangorn's leave, I will visit the deep places of the Entwood and see such trees as are nowhere else to be found in Middle-earth. You shall come with me and keep your word. And thus we will journey on together to our own lands in Mirkwood and beyond. To this Gimli agreed, though with no great delight it seemed. And just love these guys. I forgot all about Legolas's major enthusiasm for trees. He's a tree boy. But then the next line broke my heart. Here, then, at last, comes the ending of the fellowship, said Aragorn. And then I laughed a little bit because I was like, dude, Boromir's been dead for months and you are just now saying this? Like,
wow.
Poor Boromir.
Wow.
Like, Boromir died and he didn't seem to be worried about the fellowship ending, but it's only when the rest of them leave.
Mary
like,
Clay, he is there in spirit. What are you talking about right now? Oh, my goodness.
Oh, man. Oh, man.
The Boromir fans are very upset. They're like, oh, no. That's true, Aragorn. Come on.
And this is where we're going to leave this week's episode. I did a couple listener polls on Twitter and Facebook and Discord. I don't think I made it over to Instagram. Oops. And I asked if you guys would prefer for this to be 1-part or 2-part episodes because I genuinely never know what you guys want. If you like the 2-parters, if you don't like the 2-parters, but by and large, people wanted the 2-part episodes. If you were one of those people who didn't, I'm sorry, but there was just too much to talk about here. And you might be surprised to see that we did in fact stay on topic for pretty much the entire time. So I'm pretty proud of that one. So come back next week for part 2 of this conversation. That's What I'm Talking About is a proud member of WB&E. You can learn more about the network by going to wbne.org, where you will find our other amazing shows, such as Hello from Elsewhere.
Do you find yourself thinking deeply about pop culture?
Do you wish for a super nerdy podcast that explores your favorite movies and books?
Well, look no further. From WBNE, it's Hello from Elsewhere.
On our podcast, we promise to literally transport you to all your favorite fictional settings.
I don't think we can actually promise that.
Yes, we can. Travel with us to the Death Star.
We can't put people in harm's way like that.
Or visit beautiful New Asgard.
That's so many plane tickets to Norway.
Explore the eras of Jane Austen or Frankenstein.
Metaphorically, we don't know how to implement time travel.
We do now on Hello from Elsewhere.
We're going to get in trouble with these promises.
With new episodes every other Friday, Hello from Elsewhere is available wherever you find your podcasts.
Yes, that part is true.
You can even listen on the Hogwarts Express.
Oh boy.
The cover art is by Graphite, aka Vaishon Brandon. You can support him on Instagram at graphite.vmb. You can find the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at TolkienAboutPod, as well as join the Facebook group. You can find me on Twitter at MCWhatsup and Instagram at MCTurnedDownForWhat. And you can become a patron of the show and support the show, like Taylor. Taylor, thank you so much for becoming a sponsor of this week's episode. I appreciate your support so much and always appreciate your presence in our Discord community, which is one of the perks of That's What I'm Talking About's Patreon. So if you're interested in finding out what the perks are, go to go to patreon.com/TolkienAboutPod. There's no discussion question this week. There will be one next week, but this episode does come out on September 1st, which is, of course, back to school for Hogwarts. So everyone have a safe journey to Hogwarts. Enjoy the ride on the Hogwarts Express. I do not recommend flying there in a Ford Anglia. And that's what I'm talking about.